All right. Well, we'll go ahead and call tonight's meeting of the Governmental Affairs Committee to order at 6:33 p.m. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back to it.
Happy New Year.
Greetings and salutations.
Hello, Happy New Year.
Hello for me, and Happy New Year.
Hello, Ren.
All right, everyone. We'll just dive right in with some quick attendance. Tess.
Here.
Kelly.
Here.
Ren.
Here.
Sean.
Here.
And Kevin, I do not believe is here yet. I only see one public attendee at the moment, and it's not Kevin. So Kevin is absent for now. First up on the agenda, as always, review and approve our committee minutes. So we have motion A, approve the GTLNC December 7th, 2021 Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. Do I have a first to open discussion of the minutes?
First to open discussion.
Thank you, Tess. Do I have a second?
Kelly.
Second.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, any discussion on the minutes?
I'm just looking for the duties and powers, the language that I asked to be reinserted. I'm not on the motion to amend. It says item number 9 under duties and powers. Was that amended on these minutes, Catherine?
That was an amendment to the November minutes.
Okay, got it. All right, sorry. And then these are from December 7th. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other discussion from the committee? Hearing none, seeing none. Jonathan, I see your hand is up. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. It is item number 9, just like Tess said. I have this in my notes. I don't like the language of it. It doesn't ring a bell on what we agreed to it. My memory is including agenda items from board. I'm not looking at that sheet of paper. I'm reading my notes right now, meaning the minutes. So you have to help me out. If I switch screens, I may screw up the Zoom thing. In any case, I think Tess is trying to recollect that what you're reading right there in number 9 doesn't say what we want it to say if we're all on the same page. We want the duties of, if I'm recalling, it's the president's duties, including when he creates the agenda, it's including agenda items from board members, not however it says it. It says it in a very watered out language. You read number 9, it'll help.
Yeah, I think it's been corrected.
I can go back and bring up the full text of it, because that is just a sentence that was removed from it, not the entirety of number 9.
And it was replaced, correct, Catherine?
It was put back in.
Right. Okay.
It didn't replace any text. It just added to what was in there.
Right. To clarify, to be abundantly clear, it was removed, and then the exact same language was replaced when I commented. Right.
Yeah. So right now, number 9 reads duties and powers. President roles main purposes: 1, to prepare agenda with input from the council; 2, to moderate meetings in accordance with all obligations required of the office, including Robert's Rules of Order; 3, to be spokesperson for the council, including explanation of any minority views. The committee's consensus was that the council should set policy, approve and disapprove proposals, and that the council should reserve all other authorities to itself collectively.
Thank you. That's exactly what I had asked about. All right, thanks.
All right, we do have another call-in listener. If you would like to raise your hand at any point in time, you can press *9. So if you ever need to raise your hand, that is how you will do it. Any other questions, comments, discussion on the December 7th minutes? Hearing none, seeing none, let's proceed to a vote. On motion A, approve the GTLNC December 7th Governmental Affairs Committee minutes. How do you vote? Tess?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Ren?
Abstain?
Thank you. Sean?
Yes.
All right, and I'm a yes as well. Motion passes 4-0-1. All right. Next up is public comment, 2 minutes per speaker on any governmental affairs committee related subject that is not on tonight's agenda. Go ahead, raise your hand. And Jonathan, I see your hand up. You can go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Last night in the public safety meeting, I mentioned that I believe that the neighborhood council ought to be involved in issuing these directives to the city government on how they feel about policies in place. We're talking about public safety now. So I mentioned whether or not it's a CIS or any other format, I think that the neighborhood council ought to be talking about and sending directives to the city government having to do with 3 things. One is police funding, it's been reduced. Number 2 is Proposition 47, which I think the council ought to oppose. And the third thing would be Gascon policies, is what they generally call it in city government. I believe that the neighborhood council ought to issue some sort of a statement against all of those, since in most books of people, most opinions, it's hindering law enforcement. The second thing, since I only have 2 minutes, I'd like to mention is that plum meeting that Ren chaired. This is government affairs, and I think it's very much a government affairs subject as well as the main agenda, the general meeting agenda. That plum meeting should not have progressed. It was not properly noticed. You can't notice a meeting without giving the date and time. No stakeholder agreed to it, and you went ahead and did it anyways, and that better come up in the general meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. I will remind everyone that it was properly noticed as a special meeting.
There was no time. The time was incorrect. It was pointed out that if a stakeholder went online to attend the meeting at the posted time, unless they sat there for 30 minutes,
The
they wouldn't
agenda
have-
itself did say 6:30. There was an error on the website. It was an honest mistake, but thank you for your concern.
Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment? As a reminder for any call-in listeners, you can press *9 if you would like to raise your hand. Hearing none, seeing none. Any committee member news and announcements related to governmental affairs? Hearing none, seeing none. Shall we dive into our ongoing business, the bulk of which this evening will be review and discussion of the proposed standing rules summary, which is available online at gtlnc.org under the Governmental Affairs Committee page. All right. How is easiest for us to do this? I'm happy to screen share the draft that we have. And I want to really make clear, this is a draft. This is a starting point. This is not a summary of, we've been over this and we're just trying to make sure that we're all good with what we've discussed. This is a starting place. So we are very, 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 very open to any ideas, any suggestions of what we would like added if we think that something is confusing in here or not appropriate for the standing rules. If it really should be in the bylaws as opposed to in a standing rule, or if we just think that it doesn't need to be codified necessarily, like, please feel free, speak your mind. This is a starting place. I'll go ahead and share what we've got right now, which is a starting place. So let's see if I can get this. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a fundamental question. Where do the bylaws end and the standing rules begin?
What do you mean by that?
Well, exactly what I said. What the standing rules are more procedural, things that can be
Yes.
altered, without going through approvals, etc. So the minutia of procedure.
Yeah.
So where do the bylaws end and the standing rules begin? In other words, what is more appropriate to a bylaw than to a standing rule and vice versa?
Well, it's exactly what you said. So the bylaws are the structure, and we've discussed this before. The bylaws are kind of like the Constitution. It is the structure, the basic structure of the government, of the GTLNC, and the nitty-gritty of procedure of how things actually happen that may need to shift a little quickly when, say, we suddenly have a pandemic and we're doing things virtually instead of in person. Those sorts of things go in the standing rules. So, and we have to keep in mind, part of the reason that we're setting up standing rules is because the bylaws, they are only able to be changed during done open periods, which are not every year, which are not for a full, like an entire year at a time or anything like that. They are short periods of time when you can submit them. So if there is something that is, procedural that's in there, like it's better to have that in the standing rules so we can update it, even if it is something that's not during the done open bylaw change period. Does that answer your question, Tess?
Yeah, I guess, we're just going to have to go on a case-by-case basis. Yeah,
the bylaws are the structure. The standing rules are the
details.
procedure.
Okay. All right.
So these are in no particular order, but the first thing up on the list is the current standing committees, which is just a list of the current standing committees. And when a new committee is established or when a committee is disbanded, then this list gets updated. I've seen it on a couple other neighborhood councils' standing rules as just a good way to make sure we're tracking what's considered a current standing committee, since they are not listed in our bylaws.
Very good. And were you aware that the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment is this is related and possibly could fit in here. The Department of Neighborhood Empowerment is supposed to keep a list of past board members, elected board members. And when I requested this, it only goes back a year or two, which I find rather surprising, especially given term limits. So I think we should add something here within the current standing committees that, that a list, an updated list of elected board members is kept by the neighborhood council with copies to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, since they haven't been able to keep up with that themselves.
I don't think that would fall under standing committees, but we can have it as a separate standing rule.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be good, since I see a need for it, and it, it's supposed to exist, but it doesn't.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I have a sort of a general question, which is leaping ahead a little bit. This is the first I've seen in the standing rules of reference to Rosenberg's rules of order. What is, a simplified parliamentary procedure? I looked them up before the meeting. Is this, what is the purpose of Rosenberg's rules of order except to create a digest of an enormous parliamentary procedure book of Robert's Rules of Order? Is that all?
I mean,
it is? The reader's
that's
digest
honestly
portion?
about 95% of what it is. It's like a 2 or 3 page thing that, oh gosh, I can't remember if he was a state senator or state assemblyman here in California. But Rosenberg put together basically a digest of some simplified parliamentary procedure. It is not as strict and parliamentary, as it were, like British Parliament, as Robert's rules. But
Where
sorry,
does it deviate?
it's just a lot simpler. Like Robert's rules goes into a lot of detail, and there are some places where Rosenberg's rules just doesn't include some of the elements that Robert's rules does.
Mhm.
If you want me to do an analysis of where exactly they
No, I
differ,
can do that. But I hadn't heard of it until your standing rules draft here. Okay, so it's came out in 2003, it looks like. So I guess it's been around for, or at least it's included in a document that's dated 2003. All right. Yeah, I want to do some further research on this. Thank you.
yeah, I just think, for the sake of simplicity and the fact that this is a neighborhood council, we are not the US Congress, we are not the British Parliament, we don't have a parliamentarian on staff at all times. We might as well go with something simpler. That was my suggestion. And by the way, if anyone's wondering where we are on the page, we're down in number 5, parliamentary procedure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this something that Dunn recognizes as well?
Yes.
Okay.
It is in the standing rules for Soro
Okay.
Neighborhood Council. And I know that in our Dunn training, there have been a couple mentions of Rosenberg or Robert's rules.
I honestly remember Robert's rules, but I don't remember Rosenberg's,
Yeah,
sadly.
I'm hearing about it for the first time with this. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a California originating set of parliamentary procedures. So it's a little closer to home than Robert's rules, but it's not radically different. It's just a lot less confusing, and there's just a lot in Robert's rules. It's a whole tome.
It's
of a
huge.
book. Yeah, and Rosenberg's is boiled down to about 3 pages. So figure we have enough difficulty getting people to read 1 or 2 page documents. We might as well go with that. Do we want to finish out the parliamentary procedure number right now, or?
I'm sorry to go out of order. It's all the same to me.
Okay. The other thing that I added into the parliamentary procedure section is actually setting public comment rules regarding speaking time. Rather than have a specific amount of time defined in the bylaws, especially since the bylaws currently contradict themselves as far as what that time is required to be. I was thinking in the standing rules, we could make it clear. And if there is a different amount of speaking time that we want for general public comment versus public comment on a agendized item, I've seen a couple other neighborhood councils also allow for people to, at the start of a meeting, make a single comment for an extended period of time on multiple agenda items, rather than having everyone do it at the time of the agenda item. But those
Yeah, I mean, I think flexibility is key, depending on how many people want to comment and how, how hot the issue is, that people who wish to be heard have an opportunity to be heard. And if there's 40 people, then the amount of time has to be limited accordingly, or a special meeting is scheduled. So, and you're on, which point are we on now? Are we?
This is still on point 5, parliamentary
so-
procedure.
Okay, comment rules regarding speaking time. Yeah, I mean, I've attended plenty of meetings, the City Planning Commission, where people will speak on more than one point at the same time, as long as the amount of time is increased to permit that, and so that it's clear. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. I kind of liked the idea, and this is honestly a result of our good friend Puppet, that showed up and decided to take 3 minutes on every single election for our executive committee last year, and that really ended up wasting a lot of people's time. And if we could say, okay, if you want to speak on an agendized item, you get 1 minute for that agendized item, or if you want to speak on multiple agenda items, you get a total of 3 minutes or something like that.
That's fine. I mean, but here's the thing too, that when you come to a meeting prepared and you may know that you want to speak on 3 items, and you can say so at the top of the meeting. But what if you decide on the spot that you want to comment on a 4th or even a 5th agenda item? Are you precluded from doing so?
Well, that would depend on how we write it.
Okay. Well, I think flexibility, because the fact is we want people to be heard. And if Puppet, is the Puppet is the worst case scenario, you still have to permit for, people with legitimate concerns and who are not as fluid in the procedures of speaking at public meetings, especially via Zoom. I think at least one stakeholder or more has brought up the fact that the elderly have, difficulty with Zoom, and some of them just can't manage it. So we're excluding people, and then to, give another level of difficulty with these rules, which I understand and appreciate, because you don't want one person speaking for 45 minutes on a topic. I would defer to giving the greatest amount of time to public comment possible within reason, and then make sure that the chair has the ability to, if somebody is being offensive or, within the definition of out of control that's prescribed by Dunn, that person be given a warning and then muted. And I think we've addressed that in the bylaws.
Yeah. Do we have any other comment from the committee? I do see Jonathan's hand is up.
I got one more thing I'd like to add to that. I think that there are times where people will have, a passionate argument, or there's times that there won't be. I think that if anything, it should be up to the discretion of each committee member. We'll decide ahead of time, depending on if it's like Tess said, if it's a hot topic or not. And perhaps maybe the rule should be, if anyone's disruptive, it should be where we have an opportunity to limit, because there are times where it's not a simple topic and it's not something, very cut and dry, where a little bit more information needs to be disseminated. And then, perhaps that might be the case for something like that. But if it's something limited where it's just, I want a quick something, you give them that little bit of time and then you move on. But I think it should be more defined for the idea of, like, for the Puppets of the world that will come in and purposely disrupt the committee meeting and then cause, that giant time suck. I hope I'm making myself, or I'm trying to, I guess really it's more along the lines, we should possibly curtail the time specifically for people that are not being helpful, or that are, deviating from what we're talking about. Those are the people where we should really be strict on the time, and then maybe adjust accordingly for whatever the topic is, depending on whether it's a hot topic or not.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful with adding any subjectivity to whether or not we allow people to speak more, because then it gets into questions of whether we're being fair to everyone. But we are allowed to tell people that something is not on topic, and therefore, they need to either get back on topic or they're done speaking.
That's primarily what I meant. Yeah, maybe that should be the sticking point. If it's not directly germane to what we were talking about, then you have an opportunity. You give them a certain amount of time to get back on topic. If not, like you said, they could be muted. But something that lets people know that we're running a tight ship with the topics and trying to stay on top.
Yeah, Ren, I see your hand has been up.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to item 2, agenda setting and distribution.
We will get back to that. We're just finishing up parliamentary procedure because we jumped ahead. Tess had a question. So Jonathan, go ahead. Jonathan, have we lost you? Do you need to unmute? Or?
I had to change screens to unmute because I'm trying to look at the document at the same time. It's not so easy. I didn't realize you're following in order. Are you or aren't you? Because I don't want to speak out of order. I'm trying to make this organized for you.
We unfortunately jumped ahead. Tess had a question about number 5, so we're just finishing up number 5, and then we'll go back to being in order.
Okay, then if you don't mind, then I'd just like to say a couple of things in the general sense is that I think until the standing rules are written, until we're looking at the end, what's proposed, all of this, it's so general, and there's things missing off of this that we talked about. So, for example, I even sent you a memo or a email about putting together on the standing rule. One of the standing rules is how meetings begin. In other words, a prescribed announcement that any chair of a meeting has to follow in order to open up the meeting, because these Zoom meetings are very clumsy, especially for stakeholders. So for example, we've got board members who check in at these Zoom meetings, and I'm noticing they leave before they're over. There ought to be something in the standing rules about asking to be excused from a meeting so that all the parties know that somebody has left the meeting. Things such as that are missing on this, but to go through each thing, we'll talk about it and it'll be uncaptured generally because we're not really working with the details. I mean, these are just this is like a summary, and until we've got something written that looks like the final result, we're not really these are just the subjects.
Well, this is our starting place, as I said before, and yes, that would be something to put in, for instance, parliamentary procedure, to make sure that that is where we include, here's how each meeting should open. But this is a summary document so that we have a starting place of what we would like to draft. And this is where we build the detail. This is the meeting where we discuss what detail we want to go in. Tess and I did not want to be prescriptive and show up and say, this is what we think should be done. We want to hear from you and from the rest of the committee rather than just do it all ourselves.
So you're saying the opening of a meeting is under parliamentary? To me, it's a point. It's meeting time, place, notifications, postings. It's how meetings are conducted. It's another point. I
mean, it could be a separate standing rule, but I do think that parliamentary procedure is the procedure of a meeting, and therefore how a meeting is supposed to open would be part of a meeting's procedure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
and to the point about Rosenberg's rules of order, to simplify, I think a cheat sheet would be useful, because it is true. I mean, these meetings are not, they're confusingly run sometimes, especially for folks who are new to the process. So I would agree with that.
All right, let's go ahead and get back to number 2 and start going in order again. We are on agenda setting and distribution. Items may be placed on general board agenda by committee chairs or by request of any 2 council members. Committee chairs set committee agendas and must include any item submitted by a committee member. And this is where we would establish public posting locations. I will note, and this is not a well-phrased summary, but the committee chairs would essentially be putting anything that came out of their committee, not just they have a special power above other council members to add things. They would just be responsible for doing the bullet points that come out of their committee, any motions that come out of their committee that need to go to the general board. Okay, any comments, questions, anything that we feel like is missing from this one, anything that we want to be more specific?
Yeah, if I can jump in at this point, we need to set some timeframes here because the chair of the committee has to submit an agenda 72 hours ahead, and he has to get ahead or she has to get ahead of that timeline. Anything that's going to be on the agenda can't just be sprung on the chair, a few hours before the deadline. It needs to have I would say at least 3 days, maybe 5 days ahead of the 72-hour deadline to submit something for the agenda.
Okay, so maybe we say 1 week ahead of the meeting.
That would be ideal. Yeah.
Great. I think that sounds reasonable. And obviously there are occasional extenuating circumstances where something super urgent comes up, in which case either there can be a special meeting or I think the chair or the president can make the decision that this is an urgent matter and can be added slightly after the deadline, but in general, 7 days, I think.
1 week ahead of the meeting, excepting extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
That can just follow the 72-hour rule, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to number 3, annual meeting procedure. Establish the annual meeting includes election of officers, standing committee chairs, appointment of second signer, primary and second bank card holders, and CIS submitters, at least 2, announcement of youth seat candidate period, and establishing this section, the standing rule would also establish the order of operations for filling each position above.
Are the CIS submitters elected or appointed?
I mean, they currently are selected by board action. There's not really a rule right now in place for how they get done, other than, done requires that there be a board action. So the board has to vote on it in some way. The board could elect them, or the board could simply select them from the, confirm or reject an appointment by the president.
Okay. And who are our current CIS submitters?
Currently myself and Colby. And Kelly, I do see your hand up. We were selected in part because Colby is president, and I am one of the chairs of Governmental. And Kelly, you can go ahead.
I just think that I hate to bog things down, but I do think that I love that this annual meeting procedure is in here, but I also think there should be a requirement that this is previewed in the board meeting prior to the meeting where it happens.
That's a good one. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, especially when it is a new board that's going to be starting.
Yes.
That would be really good. And so back to the CIS submitters.
Mhm.
So we don't currently have a procedure in place to elect or appoint them. So because I don't recall specifically that happening, and I'm not arguing with it, but was there a board action for you and Colby to be the CIS submitters? Is Colby
Yes.
sort of okay. All right. When was that board action?
I'd have to double check, but I think it was in August.
Okay.
The previous councils used the chair of the Governmental Affairs Committee to submit CISs, and I think it was mostly just because she knew how to do it, and we didn't have many in the past. But I think going forward, I think there's a sense that people want to have a lot of CIS input to the council. And so I think we should formalize the process and have more than two people who can do it. In case one person is, out for a couple of weeks or something and something comes up that's critical.
I agree.
Yeah, so we can have up to 5 individuals allowed to submit CISs.
Mhm.
And up to 5 board members, I should say, not just anyone. Part of the reason that I put at least 2 in here is exactly what Ren said. We need to have a backup in case someone is out.
Good. Yeah, I agree.
Particularly up on the issue and can write it up relatively quickly, as opposed to have somebody, start at the beginning and learn about all of the elements before they put into the council. I mean, some CISs are very short, but some others can be 3 and 4 pages of background information if some issue is important and local.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, when this is CIS submitters, this isn't who can submit a CIS to GTLNC for consideration. This is after the CIS is passed, who can file the document in the city system so that it attaches to the council files. So they shouldn't really even be the ones that are necessarily writing any of it. They should just be taking what has been approved by council to be submitted, whether the
Well,
council
that's
in
just some
support or
technical,
opposition.
that's just some technical procedure. So then if you distinguish between those two, which I'm glad you've clarified, because I understood it as the person who drafts it, how many elected board members are enabled to draft CISs?
Literally anyone can draft a CIS.
Okay. All right.
Stakeholders too.
Okay. All right.
Part of it too is the follow-up. I mean, assuming you put in a CIS most of the time, then you have to track if the city clerk notifies you every time another neighborhood council or any city council action on the topic. Inbox starts to fill up with a lot of feedback, if you will. And you have to have the time and energy and knowledge about what you're looking at to see what's going on. And then you can report back, of course, to the GTLNC and say, here's the latest on that issue.
Is there a training on that, Ren?
I'm sorry?
No.
Is there
No,
a
there's
training on
not.
that? Okay. All right.
Yeah, there hasn't been, but there ought to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not that hard, but okay. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there is like a short PowerPoint deck that they send you when you're approved to be a CIS submitter so that you know how the interface works.
okay. Cool.
All right, Jonathan, I see your hand up. You can unmute.
Thank you. Catherine, I wanted to ask you, where is this document? Because the reason I was flipping back and forth through screens before is I'm taking my documents off of the website for the notification of this meeting. And this document isn't in the documents dated from December 7th. And there's nothing for 2022. What is in the meeting for December 7th and what I was originally looking at, and I was confused at the beginning of the meeting, it's been posted with the bylaw changes. So the document that you're showing right now on the screen that starts with current standing committees, number 1, I can't find this document and work with it before the meeting. In other words, I was looking at a different document because it was posted for the meeting. Who did this? It's the wrong document, evidently. They posted the wrong document.
Yeah, I'm looking at the website now and I can see that they haven't updated it to open the 2022 things for when you scroll down. I don't know what happened there. I don't know why that went wrong, but hopefully you all can see this on the screen right now and we can work with it together during the meeting.
I'm willing, I'm flex, I understand mistakes happen, but I want you to understand that was my initial attitude was I'm reading a document that looks so off base. It was the wrong document and I didn't realize you're looking at something different than me. All right, thank you.
So just to clarify, because Catherine emails all the committee members the documents, so I don't bother going to the website, generally speaking, most of the time. What exactly is missing? Is it the draft of the standing rules, Catherine, that you emailed us?
It's the draft of the standing rules and the draft of the minutes are not available online.
Okay.
Nor are our historical minutes from March of 2021 onward, which cool. Okay. That is an issue. Thank you, Jonathan, for letting us know. I will talk to Robin and Colby and exec and see what's going on and why the website does not show 2022 documents yet.
Okay, so there are no 2022 documents.
I mean, I think if you happen to catch it before the meeting started, it would have been probably clickable, but if you scroll down on the page, it hasn't opened up the section for 2022 yet. So I'll let them know that's an issue.
So this problem that we've been having for well over a year, that the meeting link disappears when the meeting starts, is ongoing. All right.
So is this, sorry,
Go
great
ahead.
Tess. No, I was gonna say, is this an advent of our people that are supposed to be monitoring our website? Is this another issue that we're having?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, well, this is just so impossible that this has gone on for a year without being fixed. But I'll make my comments known separately since we're going to focus on standing rules here. Okay. So,
anything else on the annual meeting procedure? Okay. Next up is number 4, vacancies. Lay out process / timeline for notice of vacancy and how to submit for consideration, including where the vacancy is announced and posted. Sorry, go ahead.
So obviously, I think the notice of vacancy should be put out immediately, in the next weekly newsletter, whenever that is, after the notice of vacancy has occurred. And then I don't know if the rules call for it being posted or available or publicly noticed for at least 30 days or something like that.
So that is exactly what we're trying to decide. What is the rule about how long it needs to be posted, where it needs to be posted? My recommendation it needs to be included in every single newsletter that is disseminated during the vacancy period. It needs to be posted on our website in a prominent way. and it needs to be on our social media pages.
Of course.
Is there a time frame that
A lot of other neighborhood councils do 30 days. I would say that it would be reasonable to accept
a minimum or a maximum of 30 days?
I think most of them simply say 30 days to submit for consideration.
Okay. And then if we get nothing, it could just be something that just lies, within all of the information that's being disseminated. It could be just, we're still looking, keep it going. But I get what you're saying. That could be something. I think 30 days is a good number.
Yeah, and it longer is not ideal, because if we are missing a board member, we want to, we want another voting board member. I would say, yeah, listed prominently in every single newsletter at the top of the newsletter, because those newsletters can get pretty long. Yeah, and what I've noticed about the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council website is, it's all calendar based, which is somewhat problematic, because where would you put on this website now? Where would you put an announcement in where would you prominently place an announcement like that? You have to scroll all the way down, down to see those little thumbnails that are from the latest newsletter. So
you could put it right in the banner. Right now we have 2 buttons in there about the council and the COVID-19 update button. And we could add a button or replace the COVID-19 update button, since I don't think we've been updating that. We could just put a button right at that top banner that says there's a vacancy on the council. Click here for more info.
Yeah, that would be good for sure. Yeah, but certainly prominently, because it, unlike a lot of websites, there's not a clear place to put something that's not a calendar item.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I have to say.
All right.
That.
Great. One other thing that I had considered putting in here and I didn't include in the summary is that, any candidate statements submitted would be included as a document for the meeting in which the selection would take place. So, if there were 3 people that were submitting for consideration to take on a board seat, they could write up a little, paragraph in the same way that we all do when we run for the actual election.
Good idea. Good idea.
Okay.
And by the way, and then what is the process? So somebody steps down, they notify in accordance with the bylaws. Colby or the president gets the notification. He puts out, what's the process then? He announces it to the board and when does the clock start ticking? In other words, when the vacancy is submitted or the first date of dissemination of that information?
It would be the first day of dissemination of that information, I think, as far as the 30 days go, because it would be really unfair to the public for, that 30-day clock to start for taking submissions before they're notified of it.
Okay. Then I would also add something to the effect that in the standing rules that the dissemination of the notification of the vacancy should occur within 1 week of receipt of.
I think that sounds great.
Yeah, because, we want to get it filled as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And of course, we had previously included in the bylaws that none of this will happen within 60 days of an election, because that's in a bunch of other neighborhood council bylaws. And I think that might even be in the bylaws template that they've given us, that we shouldn't be appointing someone to fill an open board seat, 20 days.
So And that's a good point. So that's 60 days prior to the election. We know generally what the election day is. Let's say it's May 1st. So, okay, so I'm just thinking backward. When would be, when you say 60 days, 60 days.
So if the election is on if the election is on May 1st, then March 2nd would be the cutoff. We wouldn't be able to replace someone after March 2nd.
Okay, so if the election is on May 1st, we wouldn't be able to elect someone as March 2nd. And so going back one more month, we wouldn't, we'd have to give people 1 month, let's say the month of February, or 31 days, and then back it up a week from there. So we're really talking about 3 months plus a week, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so should we include a number of days? Let's say 100 days, 90 days?
What do you mean?
Well, okay. Okay, I'm just thinking backwards.
What do you mean by the days? What would be 100 days?
Okay. 2 months, no election within, no selection of a new board member or no appointment within 60 days of an election, correct?
Right.
Okay, so there's also 30 days that you add on to that for the notification, notification of the public, correct?
Right.
And then at least 1 week, the notification to the public has to occur within 1 week of the resignation or the termination being submitted or received, correct? So we're talking 60 days plus 30 days plus 1 week.
Yes.
That's 97 days. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but why do we need to include something about 97 days?
Well, I guess we don't. I just, I would just say any public notification would have to occur 90 days prior to the next election in order for someone to be selected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just think it might be redundant.
Well, I think it adds clarity. So if anybody else wants to comment.
You also have the period, of course, between the election and the time when the new elected people take their seats. If we're shooting from May 1st, we have May and June before the new elected board is seated.
Yeah, it says within 60
period
days
of time.
of the election. So that counts for before and after the election is the within 60 days.
Say that again, Catherine, you got cut off.
Within 60 days covers both before 60 days before the election and 60 days after the election.
Okay. Well, I just think 90 days is greater clarity.
Under specific circumstances, correct? That's in the event that someone leaves prior to the 90, like if someone leaves at the 100th day, then you've got that short window of time, but that's only in a specific time if someone leaves at that specific moment. Because if it doesn't, it's not something we have to worry about, correct? But that's what you're talking about, a very specific scenario.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, I'm just, and we know do we know the election day for the next term as of now? Is that determined this far in advance?
No, it is determined more than 100 days in advance of, and so like we would know, we would never get into a situation where we don't know our election day 100 days in advance of the election.
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't say never. Things go wrong, but
Yeah.
historically, We have not had that issue.
Well, as long as these numbers are clearly set forth, 60 days prior to election, 30 days public notification, 7 days, no more than 7 days after the notification or termination is handed in, it must be publicly noticed, and the clock starts ticking, and then we're good. So
I like the 60-37. That's
Yeah.
actually that like 60-37 yes, I like that a lot. It keeps it simple and straightforward.
Great. All right, we're skipping over 5 because we already covered that one. On to number 6, council liaisons. As we discussed in the bylaws conversation, we were talking about having liaisons that are appointed by the president, announced at the next general board meeting, and they may be replaced by a vote of the council. Liaisons must regularly report to the council. As we discussed, we figure, if the council doesn't act to remove someone, then the council is fine with them, but the council can act to remove and replace liaison.
Is that done by like a simple majority, or is that,
Yeah.
or is that something to be decided?
I mean, we can set it up so that it is done by a simple majority.
yeah, I think that would be fine.
Unless people feel strongly that it should be 2/3 for any reason.
Have we ever wrangled about an appointment?
For a liaison that we don't have?
I think it's probably just the opposite. There may not be enough people for liaison positions, but I say simple majority.
Yeah, I think that's
Keep it
fine.
simple.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
All right. And then on to number 7, regional liaisons. Establish liaison to each quote unquote region of GTLNC to provide updates on the assigned area: West Toluca Lake, Toluca Terrace, Toluca Woods, and Greater Toluca, AKA no man's land.
Oh,
Sean?
really? What area is
Yeah.
that?
That would be
It's
me.
the area that doesn't get a name, Tess. It's where fully half of the people in this neighborhood council region live.
Really? So, okay, so these liaisons, are these elected board members? Yes?
Yeah, so this was something that had been previously suggested, is the idea that rather than having each board member be a regionally elected board member, it would just be each board member that serves as a regional liaison is assigned to liaise with a particular section of the neighborhood council area. So there would be someone assigned to West Toluca Lake, someone assigned to the Toluca Lake proper, someone assigned to maybe Toluca Woods and Toluca Terrace because they're sort of small areas, and then someone assigned to Greater Toluca.
And
which
I
is
think
just
that
everything else.
that makes sense practically speaking. And, I really appreciate Kelly Cole reaching out to me when I started to come to these meetings more regularly and suggesting that my updates from West Toluca Lake be on the standing agenda. So practically speaking, I think that's a good idea, but let's just say we adopt this today. Who's going to be assigned to Toluca Terrace? And let's just say it's me for the hell of it. Who do I go to? I mean, is there a Toluca Terrace Residents Association? Is there a Toluca Woods Community Center? Do you know what I'm saying? So I think it's a good idea in principle, but how do we put that into effect when, there have already been attempts made, and those attempts should be ongoing because you never know when an organization will be created. Who do we talk to about Toluca Terrace?
How do
I
those
don't-
people? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say, well, then in the opposite end of that is, how do those people that are in those respective areas get in contact, to say that what's going on, or how do they, is it something that we would then?
And that is sort of more what I was envisioning. Like, this is the point person. So if you are someone from this area that has a concern, you can say, who is the point person? Who's the liaison to my area? And you can contact them directly. so that, it's not just someone sending it generally to the GTLNC or someone always talking to the president who then has to figure out who it goes to. You just say, I'm in West Toluca Lake. I'm going to contact my West Toluca Lake liaison, and just goes directly to them.
In the past, we used to use the neighborhood watch groups quite a bit. We had good interaction through individuals. And so if something were going on in a particular neighborhood, the neighborhood watch people could say, okay, these 3 people are active in that neighborhood. I mean, literally, a block or several blocks in a particular neighborhood. So we got communication that way on certain issues, certainly community safety issues. But more generally, I don't know that some of these areas have anybody, or even worse, in some senses, you may have different groups within the neighborhood who see themselves as the spokesperson for that group. So then you start, if you start talking to one and not the other, then you create problems that you really don't need to have to deal with. By the way, is the chair of GTLNC appoint the liaisons, or how are they selected? It says liaisons appointed by president.
Yeah. So
it's the president's idea of who the spokesperson should be, or
that's with respect with the council liaison, not the regional one, correct?
Yeah, I mean, a liaison is a liaison. So yes, the idea would be perhaps that the president appoints these, and then if the council feels like it should be someone else, they can replace them.
So propose, approve, replace. Okay. Well, shouldn't we make this more democratic? Does anybody have suggestions or recommendations for regional liaisons for X, and then take those recommendations, agendize them, and go from there? And it may be that the president is the only person who has a suggestion or a recommendation. I think that when the president presents an idea or recommendation, especially for new and incoming board members, that takes on more of the air of finality, rather than enabling the entire board to put forward its suggestions in a more democratic way. So even though the ability to propose, approve, or replace is there, I think the better thing to do would be, to take a proposal or suggestion from any board member, and then discuss and vote on if necessary, and appoint from there.
I think that will take up a lot of time, but if people feel that these are roles that will be so coveted as to invite more need for democracy.
Well, I think democracy is the reason we're here, Catherine. So, and I don't envision it taking up lots of time. If people have a proposal, they can drop a name, and what's wrong with that?
Well, we're thinking about that also. That you can slice up our community in some different ways. I think, for example, Chamber of Commerce. Are we going to have a liaison to the chamber or to the business community more broadly? There are other communities as well. The religious community. You can go on and on with the different identity groups. Anyway, it's an idea. I think geographically, of course, is a given, but we may want to think about, at least for a minute, about what other kind of groups we might want to create a liaison with as well. I mentioned the neighborhood watch group. That's clearly something we need to maintain.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think when it comes to groups like Chamber, I don't know that we need a specific liaison because they already have a representative. that can speak for them much more easily than something a little less collective, like a region of the neighborhood council or even like renters. You know, the HOA represents a certain section of homeowners, but there's other homeowners that are not repped by the HOA, and there are renters that are not repped by anyone. Jonathan, I see your hand is up. You can go ahead and unmute. Jonathan, did you have your hand up on this, or was it up from earlier? All right.
Can you hear me now?
There we
Yes.
I'm trying to flip it back and forth for screens. Excuse me. It's clumsy on this computer. In any case, what I was going to say is Catherine wrote very clearly number 6 and number 7 separately. One is, you just scrolled it. Catherine, I have to rely on your page. Yeah, thank you. Number 6 is council liaisons. The president appoints them. If you need a council liaison to any particular place, the president appoints it. Number 7 is a geographic. And we talked about this in terms, if you recall, it developed from the idea that parts of Greater Toluca Lake are not being represented fairly. So this was and it continues to sound like a very good solution. So it's clear, but I agree with Tess that those regional liaisons ought to be selected by the council. In every default, things should go to the council, and it's not. People have a tendency to take as much time on something or as little time on something as they choose to. So I don't think that's a valid argument, but I do think that the council should be deciding almost everything by default, and maybe the president can do certain things that don't reflect a vote or a persuasive influence like a council liaison would, just to represent the organization. What I would call your attention to, though, is number 7. It's necessary to pay attention to these geographic areas. And I'm not all that familiar with the way people talk about Greater Toluca Lake anymore, but clearly they know where West Toluca Lake is. They know where Toluca Terrace is, Toluca Woods, but there's a place they call Toluca Village. Where does that fall in this description? Because I don't know what Greater Toluca is.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't know where exactly Toluca Village is. I know the village of
Trader Joe's area.
Okay, that is Toluca Lake. That would be the second one on this list. It's sort of Toluca Lake proper, or the village of Toluca Lake.
Why don't we call that Toluca Lake Village? Because that seems to be what everybody calls that area. And just calling it Toluca Lake is not it. That's what we all are, is Toluca Lake. Kind of matters what you're going to call areas so people can know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, officially it is called Toluca Lake, but yeah, we can call it Toluca Lake Village. And then Greater Toluca is basically everywhere that is not part of one of those 4 official areas.
Would that be like where the 99-cent store is? Is that Toluca
Yeah.
Lake? Okay.
Yeah, that
It's
would be
down there.
Greater Toluca.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I do think that the title of each area is important. I actually think number 7 is really important, and I think it really should be decided. And it's not a big deal for the council to figure things out like this, because this is really this is what the stakeholders see. Thank you.
And I would just add that when we think of our regular agendas and we think of the garden club or the chamber, there are standing spots with representatives that speak for those organizations. So this is a way in my mind, this is a way to have, concerns of these parts of our neighborhood addressed that aren't addressed by those committees that already are pretty well taken care of.
Yeah, I agree. So it's just full coverage, which is, precisely the purpose of the neighborhood council, is to be, as close to the electorate as possible.
Yes.
Great. All right. Anything else on the regional liaisons question? Next on the list is number 8, committee membership. Establish process for joining a standing committee. A requirement to attend at least one committee meeting and request joining the committee at a meeting to be recorded in the minutes for that meeting. And requirements for any training or code of conduct. Some other neighborhood councils, FYI, require any committee member, even stakeholders, to sign Dunn's code of conduct, which I think is probably a good idea for people to understand the basics of like what the code of conduct is, any conflict of interest that they're going to need to be aware of so that they can recuse themselves properly.
Now, but the code of conduct, does that include the conflict of interest? I thought that was separate. And I think
ethics training is separate, but I
Okay.
do believe that the code of conduct touches on conflicts of interest. It doesn't give you the full training, but it does make you aware that you have to.
Be aware.
Yeah, I think, I think some minimal level of requirement is good, especially for planning and land use. And, we're already expected to take a training there. So yeah, signing the code of conduct and an understanding of the conflicts of interest is I think essential.
Yeah. Do we think that it's a good idea to require people to attend at least one meeting
Yes.
in order to? Okay.
Yes. Frankly, I'd like to see them attend more, but the bar is.
There's
set.
only so many months in the year.
Well, but still, I think, there's a lot of good intentions in the neighborhood and on the neighborhood council. I think we can always raise our standards. And, we can discuss what that standard is, but I like to see, I like to see quality. So yeah, at least one meeting.
Mhm. All right. Anything else on committee membership, number 8? Anything that we definitely want in there? Do we feel like there needs to be any votes at a committee, like if someone new wants to join, or can it simply be approved by the committee chair? Jonathan, oh, sorry, hang on one second. Tess, you were who?
Go ahead with Jonathan.
Okay, Jonathan, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Catherine, do you think you want to put training in membership? I mean, where does training come in? Because we talked about it being overlooked. And then in fact, I said, does anyone have verification? Does anyone know if, I forget that young fellow.
Jay Tiddick, the junior.
What's his name?
Jake Tiddick.
Jake. No one even knew if Jay had ever been trained. I mean, the whole point of my question back at that previous meeting was training is just a completely untended to, unmaintained status. And every board member has a responsibility to get their own training and satisfy it to the rest of the council. In other words, you should be saying you've completed your training to the council, but don't you want to put it in the standing rules?
I'd like to see it in standing rules.
I guess I'm a little confused. We are saying that there are requirements for training for committee membership. Are you saying we want in the standing rules, not related to committee membership specifically, but for the board members to announce their training?
The
Is that what
question
you're
is,
requesting?
where would you like to put it? We already talked about it, that as it stands, people are required to get training, but there isn't any record, any consciousness as whether or not they've got their training. Like nobody knows if Jay
There
got
is
his training.
supposed to be, Jonathan, as we've discussed before, Dunn is supposed to be keeping these records. They're doing a pitiful job of it, but the records are supposed to be kept by Dunn and publicly available at all times. And we've reached out to Dunn about making sure that that actually does get updated. But I I know that in the past, when my training has been close to expiration, I have gotten contacted by someone saying, hey, why is your training expired? And I said, no, I completed my training. Dunn hasn't updated the page yet. You know, Robin actually did reach out to me to say your training is expired, which was wrong, but someone is tracking that.
Well,
Yeah, that's, go ahead, Tess.
So, I mean, the training is important. The training should be kept up by Dunn. I think at a minimum, a link in the agenda. There's certainly plenty of other stuff there to completed trainings or, you know, training status of elected board members is easy to do so that anybody who wants to check can see, because most people, stakeholders, don't even know that that exists, nor would they know to check or even where to check. So I'd like to see that, but you know, it's a good point. If training isn't complete, is Jake even qualified to vote at this point?
That should go for every committee member, and
Yeah.
necessarily on the agenda, or is it something that should be on the website? You know,
Yeah, I think the website's probably the best place for it.
because it's centrally located. You could have it like, check here, or like not necessarily like an FAQ area, but something that kind of like will give that ancillary information that is, that's something that Dunn should be policing. And I just don't want to see us policing ourselves. I mean, yes, we absolutely need to police ourselves without question, but for something that isn't in, other than doing the test and taking the tests and making sure you're up to date on your test should be, the individual's responsibility. But then we should have a link to Dunn's website that allows them to say, hey, look, here's what our council does, and here's who is and isn't available, or who is or isn't caught up with all of their testing, and they've taken all of the necessary requirements. I mean, I think that might be a little bit better.
Yeah, so it's a simple fix, Sean, what you're proposing is, so let's put a link, let's put a link to the training completion or the training matrix in the agenda and on the website. Simple.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, that sounds great. On to number 9.
Can you hear me? I don't know if
Yeah.
All right. I recommend, rather than do anything complicated, is add the sentence to committee membership, something like board members shall not vote unless required training is completed.
That's already a rule,
Jonathan? It is a rule. It's a requirement, but where is it?
It's not really related to committee membership. It's Dunn's rule. It supersedes all of our bylaws and everything else.
It does, but where is it getting communicated to the board? If it's not being maintained by Dunn, that's the real world. It's not being maintained. They're not keeping a record. So put it on in your standing rules right there for the stakeholders to see and for the board members to see that if you're voting without proper training, then you're doing something really wrong. Otherwise, it's invisible.
Okay. I think that should probably go in the bylaws though, because that's not a standing rule. That's not a procedural question. That's a rule. That's a structural rule.
Yeah, that should definitely be a bylaw thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. On to number 9, disclosure, biannual reminder of conflict of interest and stakeholder qualifications. To remind people that if they have conflicts of interest, if they have changes to their stakeholder qualifications or lost their stakeholder qualifications, they need to disclose.
The only question I have here is, I thought we were going to do a conflict of interest reminder at the top of each board meeting.
Yes.
Rather than biannually.
Is that just something
Sure.
we could something you mentioned as we started, something like,
Yeah, part of what Jonathan was talking about before, as far as like, here are your meeting opening procedures, letting people know what time limits are on public comment, letting people know, reminder of if you have a conflict, you need to recuse yourself prior to any discussion on the matter. and, you know, those sorts of like, here's how to raise your hand or whatever.
Is there like maybe a blurb that we could say that is something that is a fixture that can be put on the amendment that, you know, that everyone see, but you just, okay, you know, committee chair, read this at the beginning of the beginning of the meeting and just.
Yeah, just like the flight
Yeah.
rules when you're taking off, you know, they make you sit through that. Here's
Yeah.
what you do with your seatbelt. Yeah, just some text, couple of lines, make it simple every meeting.
Yep.
I
Okay,
have
so then we don't need to have the biannual thing. Sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
I just think that on number 9 disclosure, that if someone's stakeholder qualifications change and they are no longer qualify as a stakeholder, that needs to be shared with the board and not just the board president.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if someone loses their stakeholder status, they are technically obligated to resign from the board. And the way that we were proposing writing the resignation in the bylaws is that you have to resign to the full board. You can't just resign to the president. So
Make it like a matter of public comment.
Yeah, and it would need to be in a timely fashion, because
yeah,
that's been used in the past strategically quite a bit.
And
Yep.
and we should put something on there, like within 2 weeks of stakeholder status. I think even within 7 days, honestly.
Yeah, I would say, why not a week? If you're no longer participating, that gives, you know, if someone is doing that, then we should probably get that out as quickly as possible so that everybody knows as soon as possible.
Okay, required to notify the board within 7 days of the change of status.
I like that.
Okay,
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, and I think that would go into the actual bylaw
okay,
related to the resignation.
okay,
At least the way we've been previously discussing it.
good.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Great, then this disclosure section is a bit redundant. Okay, we will remove it. Number 10, outreach reporting. Establish annual assessment policy and regular metrics reporting requirements. This is something that has been discussed frequently, although there's nothing concrete as far as like, we want XYZ to be the policy. But I think the standing rules would be a good place to establish what sort of reporting requirements we'd actually want.
Yeah. I submitted a pretty comprehensive notes website bug report to the outreach committee. And I also went into some detail about the metrics that we should be paying attention to: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the number of subscribers, views, etc. So I think it would be useful to detail that. I have asked probably at least 4 times now how many subscribers we have on the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council newsletter list, and I can't get an answer. I don't know if anybody knows. If I need to speak to Lisa, I'd like to know what our open rates are. Certain things you can certainly see for yourselves, like Twitter followers, Instagram followers, but anything that can be measured can be improved. And if we're trying to reach people, then we need to know where we stand and what our goal is. I think it needs to be detailed here. So all of that.
And I would second that. And I'd also say I think it needs to be clear who's responsible for that, because when I chaired outreach for 2 terms, I could never get those answers either, because it wasn't a function of outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Of the outreach.
Well, do we want to say that the chair of outreach is responsible for gathering those metrics?
Why not?
I think not just gathering and reporting the metrics, but, overseeing it too. But, yeah. Because you can't make the person responsible for just the facts of it and not, any other involvement of it, right?
So would you say, Kelly, responsible for gathering, reporting, and maintaining the metrics?
I mean, I guess you could break it out into reporting versus content, right? But
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so this was envisioned as a requirement related to the reporting, not necessarily establishing who is in charge of outreach functions, but we could have a standing rule that says the, tools of outreach, including newsletter, bulletin board, whatever we want to say are the tools of outreach, are to be overseen by the chair of outreach.
I think that, that's what I always advocated for. I don't know if the current chair of outreach cares about that or not, but I do think that if you're going to say outreach reporting, it's really easy for almost anybody to think that means outreach committee. And I just think you have to be clear one way or another if it is,
Yeah, I think it's very good to designate a person. And if the chair of outreach wishes to delegate it to the co-chair or to a committee member, that's good too, through some board action or some committee action so that it's agendized. But yeah, this is the tool. These are the tools of how we reach people, and we're supposed to be reaching as many people as possible. And we don't even know where we stand, despite at least frequent requests on my part. I know Nick was asking about this too, early on. Paige was very interested as well. And I have not seen any answers to these questions. So somebody needs to be designated and be given oversight and authority.
Well, and also I would say that because historically we have, as a board, we've spent a significant portion of our yearly budget on outreach related matters. It's important to know how effective that is, to know if that's a good use of fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to measure it. Yeah, I can tell you my open rates off the top of my head. It's incredible. Anyway, that definitely needs to be designated. Somebody needs to be designated.
Okay. Jonathan, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I recommend what you just said, that someone ought be designated for that responsibility of keeping track. But I think the standing rule should say that person shall report to the full board the metrics, and you should define what the metrics are, which is any subscriber statistics, because that's really all you got to work with. And when we're doing this, the whole point is to understand what the present problem is in order to solve it or address it. Where is presently the bottleneck of information? Is it the president? Is it Colby who won't share the information?
It's not Colby.
Who is it? Where is it?
So
Where's the bottleneck?
the issue is that we hire a social media manager, and to my knowledge, she has been instructed to really only respond to requests from the secretary or the president. And this is done in part because historically they've wanted to sort of limit who can make requests of her, but also to limit how much money is spent, because if a ton of people are making requests for her, then you can run up that bill very quickly without realizing it, because there's not anyone tracking all of the requests going to her. So I know that she has shared some metrics at one point with us, but they were limited, and I don't think they were exactly what people had been hoping to get. But my understanding is the bottleneck is essentially that the person who has access to the metrics has not been responsive to generalized requests at meetings. And I don't know if that is because those requests have not been properly communicated to her, because she doesn't attend all of our meetings, nor is she obligated to. We'd be paying her to be there. Or if those metrics are just not something she knows how to necessarily pull for people. Okay.
Well, if I understood what you just said, the bottleneck would be the president and the secretary, because you just said that they can get those metrics and we don't have them.
Well,
Anyways, the whole
I
idea
know
is to
that they've
solve the
been
problem.
requested in the past and we've not necessarily gotten them. And I don't know if that is because of a failure to properly communicate that request. Or if that is a failure on the part of the social media manager to produce those metrics because they don't necessarily know how to or don't understand what's being asked. I don't know.
But I do have to add that it's this particular issue that we don't know. We don't know the answers to the metrics question, and we don't know what exactly the bottleneck is, although I agree with how Catherine laid it out. But this particular dilemma has been a dilemma that has been going on for years, because these are things I've asked over and over and over again when I was chair of outreach.
Can I understand something? Is metrics anything? I mean, in my head, metrics is only as important as how many subscribers are there to this newsletter. Those other things don't so much matter because social media is not the medium that people use to interact with your neighborhood council, but that newsletter is. Just knowing who subscribes to that newsletter is a big deal. We don't even know that. Is that correct?
That's correct. We don't know how many subscribers. We haven't been
That's the big
told
deal.
despite repeatedly asking. So,
Anyway,
Catherine, did Lisa quit?
Sort of. I believe that she is still doing certain functions, but not as much as she previously was.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on the outreach reporting or who ought to be responsible for outreach oversight? Hearing none, seeing none. Sorry.
Just to designate that person, that's all.
Okay, number 11, approved key holders. At least 2 executive officers must have keys to the mailbox, storage, and any office or meeting location. Any executive officer can request keys, must return keys within 10 days of no longer being an officer, may designate committee chairs as meeting location key holders. This was just to codify who can hold keys and always to make sure that every site has at least 2 people that can access it in case of someone disappearing, being busy, being out of town, being unable to access something when you need to.
Seems pretty straightforward and simple.
Great. Email access. Only current council members and administrative staff have GTLNC email addresses. Administrative staff to be announced at a meeting and recorded in the minutes prior to receiving that email address, which of course would be true because whenever we hire someone, there has to be a motion to hire that person. The email accounts will be deleted within 30 days of an individual leaving the council or a staff position. All archival agendas, minutes, and documents will be maintained in another active account. For everyone's awareness, we use a Google Workspace, and so we use the Drive to store past archives of meeting minutes and documents and agendas. Any questions on this?
I'm okay with that.
I think it's great. I think it's great. And I think it's important because we have historically had people that retained their active GTLNC accounts for years.
Yeah. The only question I have on this, and this is only because I noticed on the Empower LA website for the Plum Committee, their email addresses are listed on the Empower LA website. And I was wondering if it would be worthwhile to establish email addresses for Plum Committee members, simply because I know I would personally feel uncomfortable with my personal email address being publicly posted on Empower LA's page. And obviously someone can just create a temporary, like, you know, Joe Smith GTLNC at Gmail or whatever if they wanted to, but
Catherine, I'm not understanding your question. Empower LA website lists email addresses of Plum members?
yeah.
Meaning committee members who are not board members.
Yes.
And you're suggesting, you know what? I I would not agree with that because I think that implies a higher level of authority than they have. I think only
Okay.
elected board members should have GTLNC email addresses, and that
I
keeps.
think that's fair.
I agree
Okay.
with that.
Okay. Anything else on email access?
Catherine?
Great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Is it someplace that that all people who have email addresses of Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council shall use them only for the business of Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Council? Is that somewhere?
I believe it's in our training, but it might be good to just put that in
Right.
this.
Thank you.
It is in our training, but it wouldn't hurt to remind people because we're given very strict parameters on, I can't sell candy canes as a board member of the neighborhood council. So you're precluded or prevented or not permitted to use the logo, the City of LA logo, your email address in any non-official capacity. So yeah, I think some language to that effect as a reminder in the standing rules is a good idea.
Great. All right. Last up is number 13, grievance panel. Establish a process for stakeholders to submit for consideration for grievance panel pool, like a jury pool. The secretary is to maintain this list. Now, obviously, we've previously discussed the potential that there won't be a grievance process internally within GTLNC, but until Dunn actually establishes their new policy, let's come up with how we'd want to do this. Does it sound reasonable? Basically, I think it would be a simple Google form people could submit and say if they're interested.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right.
That seems pretty straightforward. It's not like we're gonna have a bunch of people beating down the doors to be a part of a grievance committee at this moment.
How do you know?
I'm just gonna take a educated guess.
I think if people thought they could, as the grievance committee, air their own grievances, there might be a lot more.
Perhaps, yes.
Yeah.
It's called the Grievance Committee.
Jonathan, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
What's the timing thing of this? Is it supposed to read something like establish this process for creating a pool or a panel at the beginning of the year or when the grievance is filed? Or what
I think
was
it can be ongoing. I don't think you should ever only request people's interest at the time a grievance is filed, because you might have people that maybe come into it with opinions. They want to be on a grievance panel about something. It should just be something that is ongoing at random. Anyone can submit at any time.
So it would be establish a permanent grievance panel, right? That would carry over. That was an issue. It would carry over year to year. It wouldn't end on.
No, this is a pool, like jury pool. So you know how when there's a case, you get called in to serve on a jury. So this would be just a list that we have so that when a grievance comes up, we call the first 3 people, like randomly selected from the list. If any of them have conflicts or are not available, we move on to the next, randomly selected individual until we have 3.
Right. But my question here is, how long does that panel last?
Well, that panel that gets selected would only last for that grievance.
No, the pool.
The pool is just a list forever.
But
you can
that was my point.
From it if you wanted to.
It would be a long term. So we would be creating, if there aren't any otherwise instructions from the department, then this would be a panel that's established that stands until altered.
Not a panel, a pool.
Right, a pool. I'm just reading a grievance panel pool.
Yes.
And wouldn't you also want to add in that would stand? It doesn't end at the end of the year or the end of people's terms, and it's just when people get added or take themselves off.
Yeah, we can add that.
So you need to define its duration.
is it maybe we could do it every time we have an election, you have to reapply with the idea to keep people relevant?
That sounds
To make-
great.
Have them like, if you'd like to be a part of the grievance committee, right during the election time, please put your name in the, put your name in the hat at that time.
Perfect.
So, but you're talking about board members, Sean. I think.
No.
pool-
The
No,
pool members have it,
Okay.
have it like
Okay.
have that pool constantly refreshed every election.
And you're just saying make an announcement at the election. Okay. great.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the pool should not be any of the GTLNC members.
Absolutely
Correct.
not. This is just something for the, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think also, Catherine, you need to add that language which you put out there about randomly, as a particular grievance comes up, the panel will be selected. I'd say a panel.
yeah, so that actually is language that is going in the
randomly out of that
bylaws.
group. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
put that in.
that's language that goes in the bylaws. So what we previously discussed is how the grievance panel would be formed.
Okay.
And so this is just the process for how people would join the pool. But the bylaws
Okay.
would say.
I get it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, that finishes what Tess and I had previously discussed as sort of ideas for standing rules. Are there any standing rules that you guys would like to see us add?
I can't think of any.
All right, well, sorry, Jonathan, is your hand still up from grievance panel, or do you have a suggestion?
I was going to just lower it, but there was, because I was looking at the other document. Hold on one second. I'm going to tell you what it is. Hold on. Okay, I know what it is. Okay, in our previous talks about training, it says that if we had agreed or we had talked about if a council member fails to complete training within 60 days and 2 weeks, there's a 2-week warning. My idea was board members shouldn't be warned by other board members. So whenever you come across something with a warning, I just think when someone's a board member, they have a fiduciary responsibility to meet their training. They don't need a warning from anybody. If they haven't done it, they don't vote. And if it continues, they get censored and then it leads to removal. But I don't believe in warnings for people who have fiduciary duties. Thanks.
So I think warning might be a stronger word. It's more of a, hey, reminder, this hasn't happened yet.
Okay. I was just reading the document from last time. It was called the bylaw changes, but in any case.
Yeah.
that
I
was
mean,
the
warning
point.
is the word we used, but if you feel
Right.
like warning is too strong, it's just a reminder. It's to say,
Not
hey,
Not that, it's the concept that I just think board members have fiduciary duties and, it's like they need to be removed if they're not showing up at it. If they're not doing anything for Greater Toluca Lake, we have to deal with it. We don't give people warnings when they have a fiduciary duty to do something. Thank you.
okay. Any other suggestions for standing rules?
So, sorry, was that a request to?
That was
put-
related to bylaws. Jonathan was requesting
Okay.
that we not include the 2-week warning. So we just say you have 60 days, and if you pass the 60 days, you're done.
Okay. Okay, so, but I'm sorry, were we talking about absences or?
No, this is in relation to training, where if
Sorry,
you have
okay.
not completed your training within 60 days, you would get a 2-week warning that you need to complete your training.
Okay,
And if you don't by the end of that 2 weeks, then you're no longer allowed to vote,
Okay.
period. Like even if you completed your training after that point, you're just not
Okay.
allowed to vote.
yeah, I think I can live with that. I mean, people have to be responsible and that's enough.
Okay. Anything else on standing rules, folks? All right. So right now, we're hoping that after the January general meeting, where we'll be presenting the bylaws changes summary that everyone here worked on and discussed, then at the February meeting of Governmental Affairs, we will have a red line for review. And ideally, we'd like to bring that red line to the general meeting in February so that we can have that voted on and get it submitted. We do have to keep in mind that we only have until April 1st to submit these bylaws changes. The standing rules don't need to be done before then, but the bylaws changes, that is the deadline from done. So anything we want to do has to be voted on by the general board and approved by the general board by 2/3 majority before the end of March, no matter what, because it needs to be submitted before April 1st.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay. On to new business, future projects. Is there any update on the letter of action requesting city council support?
I've had some
Legislation removing
conversations.
statute of limitations for prosecuting or bringing civil suit regarding elder abuse.
Yes, I've had some conversations with Lee about it, and we've started to draft up some ideas, but I've been focused more on the bylaws and the standing rules. So it's in the works.
Great. All right, and then the other item on new business and future projects. Sorry, am I interrupting? Okay, is discussing how we should address Governmental Affairs Committee member recurring absences. Kevin has been absent from 3 meetings now, and I haven't heard anything from him. I emailed him directly to ask him if he still wanted to be on the committee, and I haven't heard anything from him. At this point, I would personally remove him from the committee because he's not participating.
This goes to a
But-
broader issue that seems to be happening because there's only a few people that attend most of the meetings. So I am in complete agreement with you. If you're not participating, I mean, the whole point of this is to be elected is to participate. And there's a lot of people that just don't participate.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have him participate. He just hasn't.
He
shown
just
up.
doesn't. Yeah. And that's, he's kind of, it's a dereliction of duty at this point. That's, we have to go through all this training, have to go through the election. It's a process. And so if someone's not, and I have no idea what his circumstances are. So I can't even speak to that. But I think that as individuals that are elected, we need to, we have a responsibility to the stakeholders. And if you're not upholding your responsibility, then you should be, action should be taken against you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You've reached out to him, and if he's not responding, then what else can we do? So
Yeah. And like, I do want to say, Ren, I know, has missed a couple meetings, but he is engaged with us. You sent me like a lengthy response on the bylaws changes summary. So like, I know you are engaged in the committee work, even though occasionally you have to miss a meeting. I'm concerned about the lack of response. So I'm inclined to take him off for the next meeting.
Next, how about just indefinitely?
I mean,
you'd
yes,
have to-
yeah. But starting with the next meeting, he would no longer be a committee member.
I make a motion that we vote on that now.
We can't motion and vote on things that are not agendized. Like as
You can make a
motions.
motion. Yeah, you can add a motion for the next period.
Does it
I mean,
really-
that should,
is it-
I don't think we need to vote.
It doesn't
on
need
it.
to be a motion, I don't think.
no?
No,
No.
Okay.
no, I think we just, as committee chair, you can say what you want to do, and I think you just get general agreement or not.
We should have that for all the,
Yeah, I agree.
that should be in the
that
bylaws.
in my experience as committee chair, you always have the ability to do that, and you need the ability to do that if people on your committee are not attending or staying engaged, because otherwise it hampers you for quorum, it hampers you for other business. So I think it's just sort of basic.
Great. Unless someone feels strongly opposed to removing our absent Kevin. All right. Great. Anything else? Sorry, Jonathan, did you have a comment on that?
I'm not really sure it's for me to comment on, but I would offer that for me, the more valid discussion would be, does anyone have any reasons to keep him on the committee? Rather than, is there any reason to remove him? He's already not shown up for 3 times. So that's the whole point I said about warnings and stuff. It's very nice of you, Catherine, to reach out to him. But I don't think that that's the way it works when you have fiduciary duty. You volunteer to run for as a board member, but you got elected to do it. So at this point, you're not a volunteer, you're an elected person with
I mean, we
fiduciary
are still
duty.
volunteers.
You volunteer to run, to be elected. But at that point, you're not just like standing in front of the Goodwill collecting money. So I think it's sweet. It's nice that you reached out. That's a nice, elegant thing. But I don't think that's a form like a warning. You don't owe that duty to him. He's not here, and he has a duty to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else that we'd like to see on future agendas? Any new business that we'd like to bring?
I'm a little concerned. In the prior years, the homeless issue was part of the GAC agenda. It obviously touched on a number of committees, but it happened to be within GAC. And I don't know if there's anybody on our council or anybody we can reach out to kind of take that on for us. I was doing some of it at least, it's something that I think our community, it's probably the most important issue in our community. I mean, if you did a poll, I think homeless would be an issue that would be at the top of the list of people's concerns. And I just think we need to be covering that to some extent and bringing information back to our community. And as I say, I was doing it, but with the plum stuff, I'm about as much time as I can commit. But we need to reach out to someone, I think, to start bringing that in and staying on top of all that homeless stuff that's going on. Because there's a lot of money being spent. How effectively we will see, I guess. But it'd be nice to have some interaction and some, especially how it's affecting us specifically in Toluca Lake. Anyway, just put it out there.
No, thank you, Ren. And we'll go ahead and make sure that is something that goes on the general board agenda so that we can figure out what committee ought to be running point on that. And if there is any board member that wants to be sort of the lead on that. I know that at least at one point in time, there was discussion about a homeless ad hoc that I don't think ended up happening. And, not that I want to overload us with committees, but I do wonder if this is a big enough issue that it ought not be an ad hoc or live under another one, but have its own focus committee. That might be overkill, but
yeah,
let's take it to see what they think.
Nick was considering running that, and I guess he must have decided against it. So I mean, that was his. I
think he was overwhelmed. It really is a huge, a huge bunch of topics and issues, and you can approach it very locally or, our community or regionally or nationally even. So it's got a lot of elements, a lot of working parts, and trying to stay up on all of that is overwhelming.
Well, and to that, I was kind of, Nick and I were both talking about that, and that was something we both, that's what brought me into the GTLNC, the Greater Toluca Lake Neighborhood Councils, that I wanted the opportunity to talk about the homeless problem. And really, right when the real meat and potatoes of getting into that happened is right just as we were getting ready to kind of start that ad hoc committee, is right when the underpass under Lancashire kind of cleared out, and then everything kind of cleared out. Not that it's gone away, but the immediate urgency relative to Toluca Lake had kind of dissipated a little bit, and that's when he just kind of said, "Well, maybe this is." And it also coincidental, you did say, he was pretty overwhelmed.
Yeah, I can understand it. Yeah, no question.
I mean, that could live under the umbrella of public safety, because that, public safety is paramount, and that is something that kind of deals, direct with public safety. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think Colby wanted it to be a separate committee. And I mean, to be fair, while it is certainly part of public safety, it is certainly worthy of its own committee. It's a big topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Jonathan, did you have your hand up on this, or was that still up from earlier?
Yes, I did. What I wanted to mention was something that similar to what Sean is saying, is from a board member's head point of view, you think about homeless with a lot of different relationships from the board or from a neighborhood council. If you put your head into the stakeholders, I'm not sure when they use the word homeless if they're talking about if they ever divorce themselves from the idea of public safety. So if it belongs anywhere, it's public safety, because most of the stakeholders, their concerns for safety comes first, their well-being, and they don't like the homeless. I'm not talking about the people. They don't like what's happened. So it's hard to have a meeting of public safety and not be addressing its source, which in many respects, including the recent homicide, the proximity to all of this stuff, you have to couple it with public safety. But if you want to solve the problem of homelessness, all right, take it on. But I don't know that we're big enough. I think we have to deal with its symptoms. We have to cope as a community, and that's public safety. Thank you.
All right, great. On that note, unless there is anything else urgent, it has been 2 hours, and I would go ahead and close the meeting.
I'd like to write up the minutes for this meeting.
Okay. I will go ahead and close the meeting at 8:30 p.m. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
good work.